In this video, I'm going to go over 5 things that you absolutely must know before going on a birdwatching trip to Latin America, coming up right after this. Hey guys, my name is Eddie. I am a wildlife biologist and a dedicated birder, and right now I am in Spain and I'm having a great time. And I just have such nostalgia here because I actually lived in Latin America for 2 years between the ages of 22 and 24, and I mostly was just birding down there. I volunteered in Ecuador for a few months at the Tandiapa Bird Lodge, and then I also did a bird study in Mexico for a year, and I also had a fellowship to teach biology at a high school program in Costa Rica for a year. So I was super fortunate to have those opportunities, and in my free time I did a lot of birding trips all around Central America and other parts of South America. And I learned a lot of valuable things when I was down there, and I definitely learned some things that are absolutely necessary that you should know before going on a birding trip to Central or South America. So be sure to watch to the end of the video so you get all of those things. But first I just want to say that going on a birding trip in Latin America is unlike going on a birding trip in the United States or really in any developed country. And that is just because, well, it's for a few reasons. Number one, the birds are amazing. Latin America has the largest bird diversity out of the world, and there's just so many cool, colorful, exotic birds with really cool natural history. And there's so many beautiful landscapes and ecosystems. There's more biodiversity overall in the tropics of Latin America than anywhere else. But also going birding in Latin America is such a special experience because it is such an adventure. Of course, there are plenty of places in the United States that are not exactly the most developed, but when you're in a developing country compared to a developed country, it is just such a unique experience in so many ways. It just makes me appreciate so much more what I have, and also it just makes me put my life into perspective. And sorry, we got this concert going on back here. By the way, Spain really reminds me of Latin America a lot for obvious reasons, you know, with the Latin culture and all the palm trees. You got all these feral monk parakeets flying everywhere, which are native to Latin America. And in all honesty, I've been fortunate to travel to many places in the world. I think people are nice everywhere where I've traveled. But in my own experience, in all honesty, I think the friendliest people who I've ever met in the world have been in Latin America. So, you know, the people are really what make birding in Latin America really special. And the other cool thing too is that it is possible, even on like a week-long birding trip, to really get a taste of the culture, even if you speak just a little bit of Spanish. So I've traveled to some other places in the world where I don't speak the language at all, and it has been a bit harder to connect to people when they don't speak any English. But at this point, I do speak Spanish really well, so it is cool just speaking to people in Spanish and connecting to them, and you really don't have to speak that much of the language to able to connect with people. So with all that said, I'm gonna get into my 5 tips that you absolutely need to know before planning a birdwatching trip to Latin America. The advice I'm gonna give you will keep you safe, it will save you money, and it will guarantee that you have an amazing time on your birding trip in Latin America. Let's get into it. So my first tip is do not be afraid of traveling there. So the first thing you must know is that Latin America is more than safe enough to travel. Just like many other regions in the world, you want to make sure that you are going to a safe place within a certain region or a certain country or a certain city. So that is why you need to research beforehand where you are going. If you look at the travel books, if you talk to the people at the hotels, you talk to your guides, they will tell you where to go. Here's just a general rule of thumb in Latin America. In the big cities, there are a lot of sketchy areas for sure, and you want to make sure, especially at nighttime, if it's a safe area inside a city. Generally, if there's a tourist district inside a big urban area, that generally is kept pretty safe. And then if you go out to the countryside, it's generally pretty safe. A lot of beach destinations are usually pretty safe. Although in a lot of beach destinations too, where it's very touristy, where there's a lot of parties, there can be a lot of sketchiness in those places too, just because there's so many drugs and stuff like that involved. But if you hear of tourists who have bad stuff happen to them in Latin America, usually it's just because they're not being smart. A lot of times there's alcohol involved and they're just going into the wrong place at the wrong time. So if you research ahead of time, it is more than safe enough. the vast majority of the crime in Latin America has nothing to do with anything that they want from any tourists or anything. And with all this said, on your birding tour, you're probably mostly going to be out in the countryside in really safe areas anyway, where hardly anything sketchy happens. So honestly, just chill out. You got nothing to worry about. Make sure you research where you're going and you're fine. My second tip is you should really hire a local guide. So there's a lot of international tour companies that set up these tours that, I mean, it's just really easy. You know, you can drop like $6,000 or whatever, and you get a guide who, you know, they could be from anywhere. A lot of times their guides are from the United States or Great Britain or whatever. They're really good birders for sure, but you know, they organize the whole trip. It's all, your itinerary is all set. A lot of times you might be with a larger group of people who you don't know. You might still get a taste of the local culture and stuff, but chances are you won't as much if you have a local guide. I'm honestly not sure how much of the money from these big international tour companies actually goes into the local communities. My guess is that they do try to dump some money into local communities in a lot of ways. But the experience that you get with a local bird guide is so special, and I just think it's super cool to connect with someone who grew up in that place, who knows that place, knows the culture, knows the ins and outs. And of course, if you're hiring a local guide, you are definitely going to employ a local person, which is cool. And there's a good chance that they could bring you on like a little adventure that like an international bird guide wouldn't know. So like, you know, for example, on a couple of occasions, I've had my local bird guide invite me over to dinner at his house. You know, like it's happened in a couple different countries. You know, my bird guide in Belize invited me over to his village, and we just went and had dinner that night and watched soccer all night, and it was super cool. It was just like, it was a cool cultural experience. That was just super memorable. And then on top of that, a local guide is almost guaranteed to be cheaper, and your itinerary can be more flexible. A lot of times local guides, especially if you're with a smaller group of people, are way more willing to change the itinerary on a moment's notice, you know, based on what birds you're likely to see and, you know, based on just how everyone is feeling. So you're probably going to be able to stay in cheaper accommodation as well. Okay, number 2 is you absolutely want to practice your photography before going. I guess this is if you're a photographer. And the reason is because birding in Latin America, it is really hard. I mean, there's so many species there. And which is also why, you know, my first tip was to hire a local guide, but you really want to make sure that you have a guide in the first place, because unless you really have lived down in Latin America for a long time and done a lot of birding down there, you're not really going to become a good birder, because the diversity is just so massive. It's not like birding in North America or Europe or Australia. It's, you know, if you just think about any family of birds in North America, not any family, but a lot of families of birds in North America that might have like 5 or 6 species, you open up the Latin American guidebook from Ecuador or even like Panama or Costa Rica, it's just, usually it's times magnitudes. You know, they got and they have all these families of birds that don't even exist in North America. So it's really, really hard. But the other thing too is that's challenging is it's not just that there's so many species, it's also that the habitats can be pretty hard to go birding in. The canopy of tropical forests generally are really dense, and a lot of times bird lodges have like, they have like a balcony or something that you can look off into the canopy, or they have feeders or something. But a lot of times it's just hard to see the birds in Latin America, and a lot of guides they might bring you on a road or something that looks off into, like on a hillside that looks off to the canopy. So, you know, they'll get you your looks at birds, but a lot of times it is challenging. So you just want to make sure that, you know, your photography skills are up to par, you know, beforehand. Do some practice just to make sure so you can get those good shots in the moment. And I do not know if this concert behind me has ruined the audio on this video, so I'm gonna walk a bit and then pick up the camera again after I'm away from this concert. Sat down, I think I found a spot that has less noise, so we'll finish the video here. So my next tip is to read up on where you're going, obviously, like I said earlier, because of safety reasons, 100%. And set your itinerary, but make it a tentative itinerary. I think the best way to do it is really a tentative itinerary no matter what, just because a lot of times you don't know what birds you're gonna get along the way. So, you know, as you map out your route across whatever geographic area, certain birds are more likely to show up at different places, but you might not see certain birds that you really want to see. You might be one of these people who are a hardcore lister and you want to make sure that you get as many birds off your list on that trip as possible. What I would do is definitely plan a loose schedule where you're working with your guide, where you tell him, hey, I'm not sure if we're going to want to stay in this spot for this many days or not, depending on what birds you want to get. And then my last tip is you definitely want to research on the different seasons in Latin America. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people forget because, people in North America, for example, we have fall, winter, spring, and summer, 4 distinct seasons. Winter, for example, is drastically different than the summertime. A lot of times people think, oh, there's no seasons in the tropics. That cannot be further from the truth. They absolutely do have seasons. And in a lot of places, the temperature doesn't vary that much, but what does vary is the amount of rain. So a lot of times places aren't accessible because they're flooded. You can't even get to spots. When it comes to the natural history, life always goes through cycles. Different birds, different animals are active different times of year. A lot of times there definitely is a better time of year to see things. The cool thing about the tropics is no matter what time of year you're down there, you are guaranteed to see a lot of birds, but it definitely is worth looking into the wet season and the dry season. And one thing I will say about the wet season though is a lot of people think, oh, I don't want to go during the wet season because it's just going to rain the whole time. That could be a good reason not to go during the wet season, but in the tropics, a lot of times it doesn't really rain like all day like it does in like the temperate zones. A lot of times you'll get like a quick shower, it'll move through, then you'll have like 6 hours of sunlight. So just make sure that you really research for the exact place you're going what the wet season and the dry season is like. And it is just so funny, there's so many people walking by. I'm on purpose doing this video in public because I haven't done too much YouTubing the past couple of years and just trying to build up my YouTubing skills. So part of being a YouTuber is having confidence on camera, and part of it is having confidence in public. It's cool. And I'm here in Barcelona. I forget the name of this beach right here, but right near downtown. And I will also say that birding in Spain, I've done a lot of birding in Spain since I've gotten here a month ago, and it's a great spot to go birding. I was in southern Spain 2 weeks ago, and southern Spain especially, it's known as the best birding spot in all of Europe. So I will be posting more content on that. Anyways, guys, if you have more questions, post them below. And remember, take that green pill. Exploring nature is always an adventure. I will see you in the next one.